The autumn sun cast long shadows across the Rockingham ranch as Willow Montgomery stood on her front porch, Winchester rifle in hand, staring down the three men who had just ridden onto her property. At 26, she had been running the ranch alone for nearly 2 years since her father's death. And in 1885 Colorado, that made her something of an anomaly, the only female rancher for 50 miles in any direction. "Madam," the lead rider said, removing his hat to reveal a shock of sandy hair, "we ain't looking for trouble. Just passing through and wondered if you might spare some water for our horses." Willow didn't lower her rifle. "Water's in the trough by the barn. Help yourselves and then move along." "Daylight's wasting." The men exchanged glances before dismounting. Willow watched them carefully, her blue eyes narrowed against the setting sun. She'd learned early that in White Pine, Colorado, kindness was often mistaken for weakness, and as a woman alone, she couldn't afford to appear weak. The ranch had been her father's dream, 500 acres of rolling pasture, nestled in a valley with Pine Creek running through it. When Michael Montgomery had fallen from his horse and broken his neck, Willow had been left with a mountain of debt, 3 hired hands who quickly departed for steadier employment, and a herd of cattle that needed tending. The neighboring ranchers had given her 6 months before she'd be forced to sell. That was 18 months ago, and she was still here, though just barely. As the men watered their horses, Willow noticed that the tallest of the 3 kept glancing her way. There was something familiar about him, but she couldn't place it. When they finished, he approached the porch while his companions mounted up. "Miss Montgomery," he said, and recognition dawned on her. "Wade Easton. We met at the cattle auction in Denver last spring." She remembered him now, a cattle buyer who'd offered fair prices when others had tried to take advantage of her inexperience. Still, she kept the rifle ready. "Mr. Easton, didn't expect to see you out this way. I've been looking to settle somewhere. Heard there might be opportunities in White Pine." His gray eyes held her steadily. "Also heard you might be struggling some with the Rockingham." Willow stiffened. "You heard wrong, we're doing just fine." Wade nodded toward her empty corrals. "Where are your hands?" "Day off," she lied, knowing full well her last ranch hand had quit 3 weeks ago when she couldn't make payroll. A half smile crossed his face. "All of them? That's mighty generous of you, considering it's calving season." One of Wade's companions called from the yard. "We're losing daylight, Easton. You coming? Go on ahead," Wade called back. "I'll catch up." When his friends had ridden off, Wade turned back to Willow. "Miss Montgomery, I'm going to be direct with you. I've got capital to invest and experience running cattle. Word is you've got good land, but not enough help or money to work it properly. And I'd like to propose a business arrangement, a partnership on the Rockingham." Willow almost laughed. "A partnership with a man I met once at an auction. I've got references in Denver and Kansas City. Good ones. I can help you turn this place around." "Why would you want to?" "Because this is good land with potential, and you've got grit. Not many women or men would have lasted this long on their own." He gestured to the ranch around them. "But you're one bad season away from losing it all. I'm offering a fair deal, my investment and labor for half interest in the ranch operations." "Half interest?" Willow scoffed. "This land has been in my family for 15 years. I'm not giving half of it to a stranger." "Not the land," Wade clarified, "just the operation. The land stays in your name, but we split the profits from the cattle 50-50 after costs." Willow studied him. He was tall and lean, with calloused hands that spoke of hard work. His clothes were quality, but well-worn, a working man's clothes, not a dandy's. And she remembered how fair he'd been at the auction. "I don't need a partner, Mr. Easton, especially not a male one who'll try to take over." "With respect, Miss Montgomery, you do need a partner, and I'm not looking to take over. I'm looking to build something." He placed his hat back on his head. "Think about it. I'll be staying at the White Pine Hotel for a few days. If you're interested, you know where to find me." With that, he mounted his horse and rode off, leaving Willow standing on her porch, rifle still in hand, mind racing with possibilities she didn't want to consider. That night, as she sat at her kitchen table reviewing her accounts by lamplight, the truth of Wade Easton's words hit her hard. The numbers didn't lie. Between the bank note due in 3 months, the cost of feed for winter, and the repairs needed on the north fence line, she was indeed one bad season away from losing everything. And winter was coming. Pride had kept the Rockingham going this long, but pride wouldn't feed cattle or pay the bank. Still, the idea of a partnership of sharing control of what her father had built felt like a betrayal. Michael Montgomery had taught his daughter to stand on her own 2 feet, and that's what she intended to do. The next morning, Willow rode into White Pine for supplies. The small town consisted of one main street with the essentials: a general store, a saloon, a hotel, the sheriff's office, and a handful of other businesses. As she tied her horse outside Jennings' general store, she was acutely aware of the stares she received. Being the only female rancher in the area made her something of a curiosity. "Morning, Miss Montgomery," Tom Jennings greeted her as she entered. "Your usual order, just flour, coffee, and salt today, Tom, and some ammunition if you've got it." While Tom gathered her items, Sheriff Davis entered the store. He nodded to Willow. "Miss Montgomery, how's things out at your place?" "Fine, Sheriff. Heard you had some visitors yesterday, Easton and his boys." News traveled fast in White Pine. "Just passing through," she said, not wanting to discuss Wade's proposition. "Easton's been asking questions around town about you, the Rockingham." "Is that right?" Willow kept her voice neutral. "Thought you should know. Seems mighty interested in your situation." "Thanks for the warning, Sheriff, but I can handle Mr. Easton." The sheriff looked skeptical but didn't press the issue. "You need anything, you send word. Don't like the idea of you out there all alone." Willow paid for her supplies and was loading them onto her horse when she spotted Wade Easton exiting the hotel across the street. He saw her too and tipped his hat in greeting before crossing to join her. "Miss Montgomery, been thinking about my offer. Been trying to forget it, actually." Wade chuckled. "Stubborn as they come, aren't you? Your father would be proud." The mention of her father caught her off guard. "You didn't know my father." "Not personally, no, but I knew of him. Michael Montgomery had a reputation for fair dealing and hard work. Word was he was building something special out there." "And you think I can't continue that without a man's help?" she said, her tone sharp. "I think running a ranch that size is hard for anyone alone, man or woman." Wade's voice remained even. "And I think you're smart enough to know when to accept help, even if your pride makes it difficult." Willow secured the last of her supplies. "I've got work to do, Mr. Easton." "As do I. I'm heading out to the Morrison place this afternoon. Old man Morrison's looking to sell some of his stock." Clayton Morrison. Willow's interest was piqued despite herself. "Morrison had some of the best breeding stock in the county. That's right. Thought I might pick up a bull and some heifers. Good foundation for a herd." "Where exactly are you planning to keep this herd, Mr. Easton?" Wade smiled. "That depends on you, doesn't it? My offer stands, Miss Montgomery. Partnership straight down the middle. No tricks, no taking over, just good business." Before she could respond, a commotion erupted from the saloon down the street. 2 men burst through the swinging doors, fists flying. One crashed into a water trough and the other staggered back, drawing a pistol. Sheriff Davis was already moving toward the disturbance, hand on his own weapon. "Put that away, Matthews." The man with the gun, red-faced with drink despite the early hour, wavered on his feet. "He cheated me, Sheriff," I said. "Put it away," Davis commanded, but Matthews was beyond reason. As he raised his pistol toward his unarmed opponent, Wade moved with surprising speed. He stepped forward, caught Matthews' wrist, and twisted. The gun discharged harmlessly into the air before clattering to the ground. In one fluid motion, Wade had the drunk subdued, arm behind his back. "I believe the sheriff gave you an order," Wade said calmly, as if disarming angry drunks was something he did every day. Sheriff Davis took control of the situation, thanking Wade with a nod as he hauled Matthews away. The small crowd that had gathered began to disperse, but Willow remained, studying Wade Easton with new eyes. "Where'd you learn to move like that?" she asked. "Spent some time as a deputy in Kansas. You pick things up." He brushed dust from his coat sleeve. Nothing to it. But it had been something: quick thinking and quicker reflexes, without unnecessary violence. Willow found herself intrigued despite her reservations. "Come out to the ranch tomorrow morning," she said, making a sudden decision. "I'm not agreeing to anything, but I'll hear you out properly. And I want those references you mentioned." Wade's expression betrayed nothing but polite interest. "I'll be there at 9. As Willow rode home, she wondered if she was making a mistake. Partnerships were built on trust, and trust was something she'd found in short supply since her father's death. The neighboring ranchers had circled like vultures, making lowball offers on her land. The bank had been pressuring her to sell. Even her former ranch hands had taken advantage, doing half the work for full pay until she couldn't pay them at all. But there was something about Wade Easton that seemed different. Maybe it was the fair price he'd given her at the auction when others had tried to cheat her. Or maybe it was the way he'd handled that drunk without unnecessary force. Whatever it was, she was willing to listen to what he had to say, but that didn't mean she was ready to sign half her operation away. The next morning, Willow was up before dawn, as usual. She fed the horses, checked on the small herd of cattle in the north pasture, and was mending a tear in the barn roof when she heard a rider approaching. Wade Easton was right on time. "Morning," he called up to her. "Need a hand with that." Willow hammered in one last nail before descending the ladder. "Just finished." Wade dismounted, leading his horse, a fine chestnut, gelding, to the water trough. "Nice place you've got here. Your father chose well." "He had an eye for good land," Willow agreed, allowing a hint of pride into her voice. "Water year-round, good grazing, natural shelter for the cattle in winter. How many head are you running?" 73. It was a far cry from the 200 her father had maintained at the ranch's peak. Wade nodded, not commenting on the small number. "Good-looking stock from what I saw in the north pasture." They walked toward the house, and Willow felt suddenly self-conscious about its appearance. The white paint was peeling, and one of the porch steps needed replacing. Inside wasn't much better functional but sparse. "Coffee," she offered, gesturing toward the kitchen table. "Thank you." As she prepared the coffee, Wade removed a folded packet of papers from his coat and placed them on the table. "My references, as promised. Banker in Kansas City, former employer in Denver, and the owner of the Circle T ranch over in Utah, where I worked as foreman for 3 years. Willow poured 2 cups of coffee and sat down to review the papers. The references were indeed impressive, detailed letters attesting to Wade's character, work ethic, and knowledge of cattle ranching. One was from Henry Taylor, owner of one of the largest cattle operations in Utah, and a man even Willow had heard of. "These seem to be in order," she said cautiously. "But papers can be forged." Wade didn't seem offended. "Telegraph any of them if you'd like verification. I've got nothing to hide." "Why here, Mr. Easton? Why the Rockingham? There are plenty of ranches looking for experienced hands or foremen. I've been a hand and a foreman. Now I want to build something of my own." He sipped his coffee. "As for why here, I like the country. I like what I've heard about white pine, and frankly, I like the challenge. The challenge of working with a woman." There was an edge to her voice. "The challenge of turning around a struggling operation." His gray eyes met hers directly. "Look, Miss Montgomery, I won't pretend your being a woman doesn't factor in. Not many men would consider a true partnership with a female rancher. They'd try to buy you out or marry you to get the land. I'm offering neither, just a straight business arrangement between equals." Willow considered his words. "And if I agree, what exactly would this partnership entail?" "I put in cash enough to pay off your bank note and add 50 head of cattle to the herd. I also contribute my labor and expertise. In return, I get half the profits after expenses, a say in operational decisions, and a place to live. The line shack by the creek would do fine. And the Rockingham remains in my name." Absolutely. The land is yours. We're just partners in the ranching operation. It was a fair offer, better than fair, considering her circumstances, but something still bothered her. Why not just start your own ranch somewhere? Wade set his cup down. Good land is getting scarce and it's expensive. This way we both get what we need. You keep your ranch and get the capital to make it profitable again. I get to build something without starting completely from scratch. Willow rose from the table and walked to the window, looking out at the land she loved. I need time to think about this. Of course. Wade stood. 1 week. Think it over, check my references if you want. I'll be at the hotel until Saturday. As he prepared to leave, Willow walked him to his horse. One question, Mr. Easton. If I refuse your offer, what will you do? Look elsewhere, I suppose. Morrison mentioned he might be willing to sell me a piece of his North Range. The thought of Wade establishing a competing operation so close by gave Willow pause. Clayton Morrison's North Range bordered her property. Having Wade as a neighbor rather than a partner might prove more complicated in the long run. I'll let you know my decision by Saturday, she said. Wade tipped his hat. That's all I ask. After he rode off, Willow spent the day working and thinking. The proposition made good business sense, but accepting meant admitting she couldn't do it alone, something that went against everything her father had taught her about self-reliance. That evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset, a rider approached from the east. It was Clara Jennings, Tom's wife and the closest thing Willow had to a friend in White Pine. Evening, Willow, Clara called, dismounting. Thought I'd bring you some of my apple preserves. She held up a jar. Tom said you looked tired when you were in town yesterday. That's kind of you, Clara. Come sit. The two women settled on the porch steps. Clara, a plump, cheerful woman in her 40s, had taken Willow under her wing after Michael Montgomery's death. So, Clara said after some small talk, Tom tells me Wade Easton's been asking about you all over town. Willow sighed. He's offered me a business partnership. A partnership? Clara looked surprised. Not a purchase offer. No, he wants to invest in the operation, split the profits. The land would still be mine. Clara considered this. What do you know about him? Willow explained about the references and her previous encounter with Wade at the auction. He seems fair, capable too, from what I've seen. And handsome to boot, Clara added with a sly smile. This is business, Clara, Willow said firmly, though she couldn't deny Wade Easton was an attractive man. I'm trying to save my ranch, not find a husband. Can't it be both? Clara teased, but when she saw Willow's expression, she grew serious. I know, dear. After what happened with James, you've every right to be cautious. James Miller had courted Willow shortly after her father's death. She'd believed his intentions were honorable until she discovered he was deeply in debt and eyeing the ranch as a solution to his financial problems. The experience had left her wary of men's motives. This is different, Willow insisted. Purely business, if you say so. Clara patted her hand. For what it's worth, Tom's heard nothing but good things about Easton from his suppliers in Denver. Says he pays his bills on time and deals square. That was useful information. Tom Jennings knew most of the merchants in a 100-mile radius and was a good judge of character. Thank you, Clara. I've got some thinking to do. After Clara left, Willow walked down to the creek that ran through her property. This had always been her thinking spot. The water flowed clear and steady, just as it had when her father first brought her here as a child. Water's life out here, Willow girl, he'd said. With this creek, we'll never go thirsty, and neither will our cattle. What would Michael Montgomery think of Wade Easton's offer? He'd always been pragmatic. Pride won't feed the cattle, he'd often said, but he'd also valued independence fiercely. The next morning, Willow rode to White Pine again, but not for supplies. She headed straight for the telegraph office and sent wires to each of Wade's references. It would take a few days for responses, but she wanted to be thorough. As she exited the telegraph office, she nearly collided with Sheriff Davis. Miss Montgomery, in town again so soon, business sheriff. Davis nodded toward the hotel. With Easton, I presume, perhaps. Have you learned anything more about him? Clean record, far as I can tell. No wanted posters, no complaints from anyone in town. The sheriff studied her face. You considering his offer? News truly did travel fast in White Pine. I'm considering it, yes. Be careful, Willow. Men like that, drifters with big ideas, they don't always stick around when things get tough. I appreciate your concern, Sheriff, but I can look after myself. Davis tipped his hat, never doubted it. Just doing my job. As Willow mounted her horse to return to the ranch, she spotted Wade exiting the saloon with another man, Clayton Morrison, if she wasn't mistaken. They shook hands before parting ways, and Wade noticed her watching. He crossed the street to greet her. Miss Montgomery. Checking up on me. Just sent some telegrams to your references. Good, they'll confirm what I've told you. He gestured toward Morrison's retreating figure. Just concluded some business with Mr. Morrison, bought 20 head of his best heifers and a bull. Without knowing if I'll accept your offer, Wade smiled. I'm an optimist, and if you refuse, I'll find somewhere else for them. Willow couldn't help but admire his confidence. You're awfully sure of yourself, Mr. Easton. Not sure of myself, sure of the opportunity. He looked up at her, shielding his eyes from the sun. The Rocking M could be something special again. I'd like to be part of that. There was sincerity in his voice that Willow found hard to dismiss. I'll have my answer by Saturday, as promised. Over the next few days, Willow threw herself into ranch work, trying to clear her mind. She mended fences, checked on her small herd, and repaired a leak in the barn roof. The physical labor helped, but the decision still weighed on her. On Thursday, she received replies to her telegrams. All three references confirmed what they'd written. Wade Easton was hardworking, knowledgeable about cattle, and honest in his dealings. The banker in Kansas City even added that Easton had recently come into an inheritance from an uncle, explaining his sudden capital for investment. That evening, as she sat reviewing the responses, a commotion outside drew her attention. She grabbed her rifle and hurried to the porch to find 3 riders approaching, rough-looking men she didn't recognize. Instinctively, she raised the rifle. That's far enough, she called. State your business. The lead rider, a heavy-set man with a beard, reined in his horse. Looking for work, madam. Heard the Rocking M might be hiring. You heard wrong, I'm not hiring. The men exchanged glances. Thing is, madam, we've come a long way, mighty thirsty work. Maybe you could spare some water, maybe something stronger. There was something in their manner that set Willow's nerves on edge. Water's in the trough, then you can be on your way. The men dismounted slowly, keeping their eyes on her rifle. As they watered their horses, the bearded man kept looking toward the house, the barn, taking stock. Nice place, he commented. Seems awful big for one woman to manage. I manage just fine. I bet you do, he said with a smirk that made her skin crawl. Still, must get lonely out here all by yourself. Willow's finger tightened on the trigger. I enjoy the solitude, and now that your horses have drunk their fill, you can be on your way. The man took a step toward the porch. Now that ain't very hospitable, the sound of an approaching rider interrupted him. All eyes turned to see Wade Easton riding hard toward the ranch house, rifle across his saddle. Everything all right here, Miss Montgomery, Wade called as he drew near. Just some travelers leaving, Willow replied, not lowering her rifle. Wade dismounted, his own rifle now in hand. He nodded to the 3 men. Gentlemen, roads that way. The bearded man looked from Wade to Willow and back again. Whatever he saw in their expressions convinced him that pressing his luck would be unwise. He signaled to his companions and they mounted up. No offense meant, he said, though his eyes suggested otherwise. Just looking for work. Try the Morrison place, Wade suggested. I heard he's hiring for the fall roundup. The men rode off, and Willow finally lowered her rifle. What are you doing here, Mr. Easton? Saw those 3 in town earlier. Didn't like the way they were asking about ranches in the area, especially ones without many hands. Thought I'd ride out, make sure everything was all right. I had the situation under control, never doubted it. There was respect in his voice, not condescension. But 3 against 1 are poor odds, no matter how good you are with that rifle. He was right, and they both knew it. Those men had been looking for more than work. Isolated ranches were tempting targets for those with ill intent. "Thank you," Willow said finally. "Would you like some coffee?" Over coffee at her kitchen table, Willow found herself studying Wade more carefully. He wasn't what she'd expected. There was a quietness to him, a steady assurance that didn't need to announce itself. "I received responses from your references today," she said. "All favorable. I'm glad to hear it. They mentioned you came into some money recently, an inheritance." Wade nodded. "My mother's brother. Never married, no children of his own, left his savings to my sister and me when he passed last winter. And you decided to invest it all in cattle. It's what I know." He looked around the kitchen, taking in the worn but clean surroundings. "My father had a small spread in Nebraska when I was growing up. Nothing like this, just enough to get by. Lost it in the drought of '63. I've been working other men's cattle ever since, saving what I could." It was the most personal information he'd shared, and Willow found herself wanting to know more. "What happened to your family's ranch?" "Bank took it. Father died soon after his heart," they said, "but I think it was losing the land that killed him. Mother moved in with her sister in St. Louis. I stayed out west, determined to have my own place again someday." The parallel to her own situation wasn't lost on Willow. She too was fighting to keep her family's legacy alive. "I've been thinking about your offer," she said carefully. And I'm inclined to accept with conditions." Wade set down his coffee cup, giving her his full attention. "Name them." "First, we draw up a proper contract with everything in writing. Second, major decisions require mutual agreement. Neither of us acts unilaterally. Third, if either of us wants out of the partnership, we give the other first option to buy." "All reasonable," Wade agreed. "Anything else?" Willow took a deep breath. "This is a business arrangement, Mr. Easton, nothing more. I'm not looking for a husband or anything else." If he was offended by her bluntness, he didn't show it. "Understood, Miss Montgomery, business only. Then I accept your offer of partnership." They shook hands across the table, and Willow felt a curious mixture of relief and apprehension. She was no longer alone in her struggle to save the Rockingham, but she'd tied her future to a man she barely knew. Only time would tell if she'd made the right decision. The next day, they rode into White Pine together to visit the bank and begin the paperwork for their partnership. The banker, Mr. Hammond, couldn't hide his surprise when Willow explained the arrangement. A partnership, with Miss Montgomery retaining ownership of the land. He looked between them, clearly confused. "Most unusual, but perfectly legal," Wade pointed out. "We'd like to draw up the agreement today, if possible." Hammond nodded slowly. "Of course, and you'll be paying off the outstanding note on the property." "That's right," Wade confirmed. While Hammond prepared the paperwork, Willow and Wade waited in the bank's small lobby. Several townspeople passed by the window, staring curiously at the pair. "We're causing quite a stir," Willow observed. "Small towns love gossip. By suppertime, half of White Pine will have us married, and the other half will have you selling out completely. Let them talk, we know the truth." When the paperwork was complete, Wade paid off the bank note that had been hanging over Willow's head for months. The relief she felt was immediate and profound. For the first time since her father's death, the Rockingham wasn't in imminent danger of being lost. As they left the bank, Sheriff Davis approached them on the boardwalk. "Miss Montgomery, Mr. Easton, heard you two struck a deal." "Word travels fast," Willow commented. "Saw Hammond smiling as you left the bank. Doesn't take much figuring." The sheriff looked at Wade. "Those men you sent Morrison's way yesterday, they never showed up for work." "Is that right?" "Found their tracks heading south. Thought you should know they're still in the area." Wade nodded. "Appreciate the warning, Sheriff." After the sheriff moved on, Willow glanced at Wade. "You think they might come back?" "Possibly. Men like that look for easy targets. 2 of us at the ranch makes it less appealing." He adjusted his hat against the sun. "Still, might be wise to stay alert for a while." They spent the afternoon purchasing supplies, feed for the cattle, materials to repair the fence line, and provisions for Wade to move into the line's shack by the creek. The small cabin was about a quarter-mile from the main house, close enough for convenience but far enough for privacy. As they loaded their purchases into the wagon Willow had brought to town, Clara Jennings emerged from the general store, her eyes widening at the sight of them together. "Willow Montgomery, were you going to tell me your news, or did I have to hear it from half the town first?" Willow introduced Wade to Clara, explaining their business arrangement. Clara listened, her expression skeptical. "A partnership. Is that what they're calling it these days?" She winked at Wade, who had the good grace to look uncomfortable. "It's exactly what it sounds like, Clara," Willow insisted. "Mr. Easton is investing in the ranch operations, nothing more, if you say so, dear." Clara patted her arm. "Just remember, a good-looking man willing to work is hard to find in these parts. Don't let pride stand in the way of happiness." After Clara left, Wade helped Willow onto the wagon seat. "Your friend seems to have our future all planned out. Clara has been trying to marry me off since my father died. Ignore her. Consider her ignored." But there was amusement in his voice as he mounted his horse to ride alongside the wagon. The journey back to the ranch was pleasant, the late afternoon sun casting a golden light over the landscape. They discussed plans for the coming weeks, moving Wade's newly purchased cattle to the rocking M, repairing the north fence line, preparing for winter. "We should add a few more hands," Wade suggested, "at least for the fall roundup. Can we afford it? We can now. And it's an investment. With proper help, we'll lose fewer calves, keep the herd healthier." Willow nodded, appreciating his practical approach. "You know some good men, a few. There's a fellow in Denver I worked with, Nathan Mills. Best hand with horses I've ever seen, and his wife's a fine cook. They might be willing to come on if we offer them the old foreman's cabin." "A married couple would be good," Willow agreed. "More stability." As they neared the ranch, Willow felt a strange sense of homecoming, despite the fact that she'd only been gone a day. Something about having someone to plan with, to share ideas with, made the place feel more alive than it had in months. The next morning, Wade moved his belongings into the line shack while Willow prepared for the arrival of his cattle. He'd arranged for them to be delivered the following day, and they needed to ensure the south pasture was ready. Working together proved easier than Willow had expected. Wade was competent and straightforward, explaining his reasoning when they disagreed, but willing to listen to her perspective. By midday, they had repaired a section of fence and cleared a watering hole that had become clogged with debris. "You're good at this," Wade observed as they paused for a brief rest. "Most ranchers' daughters I've known were taught household skills, not fence mending." "My father believed in practical education," Willow replied, taking a drink from her canteen. "Said a woman should know how to manage everything on a ranch just in case. Wise man, he was." She handed Wade the canteen. "What about you? You mentioned growing up on a ranch in Nebraska." Wade took a drink before answering. "Small place, like I said. Father ran cattle, mother kept a garden. I learned the basics there, then picked up more working other ranches after ours was lost." "You've worked a lot of different spreads, 7 or 8 over the years." "Each one taught me something new." He gestured toward the fence they'd just repaired. "Like this style of fencing, learned that in Utah, more efficient than what we used in Nebraska." Willow found herself impressed by his breadth of experience. Her own knowledge was limited to what her father had taught her, and what she'd learned through trial and error over the past 2 years. They worked until sunset, returning to the ranch house tired but satisfied with their progress. Without discussing it, Willow invited Wade to join her for supper, a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee, but filling after a day of physical labor. As they ate, a comfortable silence settled between them. It was strange, Willow thought, how quickly they'd fallen into a rhythm of working together. There was none of the awkwardness she'd feared, none of the power struggles she'd anticipated. "I telegraphed Nathan Mills today," Wade mentioned as they finished eating. "Asked if he and his wife would be interested in coming on as hands." Good. When might we expect an answer? Few days, I'd guess. If they're interested, they could be here within 2 weeks. The prospect of having help, reliable help, was almost dizzying. For so long, Willow had been scraping by, doing only what was absolutely necessary to keep the ranch functioning. With Wade's investment and additional hands, they could begin to rebuild what her father had started. The next day, Wade's cattle arrived 20 heifers and a bull, all healthy and of good stock. Watching them being driven onto Rockingham land felt like a new beginning. These animals, combined with her existing herd, would form the foundation for their future success. As the days passed, Willow and Wade established a routine. They rose early, worked through the day, and often shared the evening meal, discussing plans for the ranch. Occasionally, they disagreed. Wade favored expanding more quickly, while Willow preferred a more cautious approach, but they always managed to find compromise. A week after their partnership began, they received a telegram from Nathan Mills accepting their offer of employment. He and his wife, Sarah, would arrive in 2 weeks. "That's excellent news," Willow said as they rode back from town with the telegram. "With 4 of us, we can really start making improvements. And just in time for the fall roundup," Wade added. "Nathan's a good man with cattle, you'll like him." As they approached the ranch, Willow noticed something was wrong. The gate to the corral stood open, and several of her horses were missing. "Someone's been here," she said, spurring her horse forward. They found signs of intruders everywhere: the barn door broken, feed scattered, and the house had been ransacked. Willow's few valuables, her mother's silver hairbrush, a pocket watch that had belonged to her father, were gone. "Those men," Wade said grimly, examining tracks in the dirt. "The ones who came by last week, 3 horses, same as before." Willow felt violated and angry. "They took 5 of my best horses, and they'll be halfway to Mexico by now." Wade's expression was hard as he surveyed the damage. "We should report this to the sheriff, though there's little he can do now." They spent the remainder of the day setting things right, securing the barn, rounding up the remaining horses, cleaning the mess in the house. When darkness fell, they sat on the porch, rifles at hand in case the thieves returned. "I'm sorry," Wade said after a long silence. "I should have realized they'd come back. It's not your fault." Willow stared out into the darkness. "Things like this happen out here. My father always said you can't let fear of thieves keep you from living." Wise words. "Still, we'll be more careful from now on." The theft, while distressing, had an unexpected effect on their partnership. Facing a common problem united them in purpose, reinforcing the sense that they were in this together. And when Wade insisted on sleeping in the barn that night to keep watch, Willow didn't argue, not because she couldn't protect herself, but because it made tactical sense to have someone guarding the livestock. The next morning, they rode into White Pine to report the theft to Sheriff Davis. The sheriff promised to keep an eye out for the stolen horses and the thieves, though all 3 knew the chances of recovery were slim. While in town, they visited the telegraph office to confirm arrangements with Nathan and Sarah Mills, then stopped at the general store for supplies to repair the damage to the barn. As they were loading their purchases, Clayton Morrison approached, his weathered face creased with concern. "Heard you had some trouble out at your place," he said. "Same gang hit the Peterson farm east of here last month, took horses, supplies." "We'll manage," Willow assured him. Morrison nodded, then turned to Wade. "Those cattle I sold you looking good on Rockingham land. You two make quite a team." "We're getting there," Wade replied. "Still plenty of work ahead. Always is in ranching." Morrison glanced between them. "Town's talking about your arrangement. Unusual, but seems to be working." "People can talk all they want," Willow said, her tone making it clear she wasn't interested in gossip. "The ranch is doing well, and that's what matters." On the ride home, Wade was quieter than usual. Willow found herself stealing glances at him, wondering what was on his mind. In the 2 weeks since their partnership had begun, she'd grown accustomed to his presence, his quiet competence, his dry humor, his respect for her opinions. It was a far cry from the domineering behavior she'd feared from a male partner. "Something troubling you?" she finally asked as they approached the ranch. Wade seemed to consider his words carefully. "Just thinking about what Morrison said, about the town talking. Let them talk, it doesn't change anything." "Doesn't it?" He looked at her directly. "Your reputation matters, Willow. I don't want our arrangement to cause problems for you." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected warmth through her. "My reputation was already the subject of gossip the moment I decided to run the ranch alone. This is no different." "If you're sure." But he didn't sound convinced. As the days passed, Willow found herself thinking more and more about Wade's concern for her reputation. It was thoughtful in a way she hadn't expected, especially from a man who stood to benefit from their partnership regardless of what the town thought. 2 weeks after the theft, Nathan and Sarah Mills arrived at the Rockingham. Nathan was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a quiet demeanor, while Sarah was petite and energetic, with a practical manner that Willow immediately appreciated. They moved into the foreman's cabin, and the ranch suddenly felt more like it had in her father's day, busy, purposeful, alive with activity. With 4 of them working, progress accelerated. The north fence line was repaired, the barn roof patched, and preparations for winter began in earnest. The cattle thrived under Nathan's careful management, and Sarah's cooking was a welcome change from the simple fare Willow had been preparing. One evening in late October, as the 4 of them sat around the kitchen table after supper, Sarah mentioned the upcoming harvest dance in White Pine. "We should all go," she suggested. "It would be good to meet more of the community." Willow hesitated. She hadn't attended social functions in town since her father's death, preferring to avoid the curious stares and whispered comments. But with Wade, Nathan, and Sarah beside her, perhaps it wouldn't be so uncomfortable. "It might be good for business," Wade said, looking to Willow for her opinion. "Show the town that the Rockingham is back on solid footing." "I suppose you're right," Willow agreed. "We'll all go." The night of the dance arrived clear and cool. Willow found herself unusually nervous as she prepared, putting on her best dress, a simple blue gown that had belonged to her mother. She hadn't worn it in years, and as she pinned up her hair, she barely recognized the woman in the small mirror, someone softer, more feminine than the practical rancher she'd become. When she emerged from her bedroom, she found Wade waiting in the parlor, dressed in clean black trousers and a white shirt, his usually unruly hair neatly combed. He stood as she entered, and for a moment he simply looked at her, an expression in his eyes that made her heart beat faster. "You look beautiful, Willow," he said quietly. The compliment flustered her. "Thank you. You clean up well yourself." Nathan and Sarah joined them, and the 4 rode into town together. The community hall was decorated with autumn leaves and lanterns, and a small band played in the corner. It seemed all of White Pine had turned out for the celebration. As they entered, conversations paused and heads turned. Willow felt the familiar discomfort of being the center of attention, but Wade's steady presence beside her gave her confidence. They were greeted by Clara and Tom Jennings, who introduced them to other townspeople they hadn't yet met. "Dance with me, Willow," Clara urged when the band began a lively tune. "It's been too long since I've seen you enjoy yourself." Willow allowed herself to be pulled onto the dance floor, and soon she was laughing as Clara led her through the steps. When the music changed to a waltz, she found herself face to face with Wade, who offered his hand with a questioning look. "May I?" She nodded, suddenly shy, and stepped into his arms. He was a surprisingly good dancer, leading her smoothly around the floor. Being so close to him, feeling his hand at her waist, catching the scent of soap and leather, awakened feelings Willow had long suppressed. "Everyone's watching us," she murmured. "Let them watch." His voice was low, meant only for her. "You're the most beautiful woman in the room." The intensity in his gray eyes made her breath catch. This was dangerous territory, far from their agreement to keep things strictly business. Wade, I know, he interrupted gently. Business only. But tonight, can't we just be a man and woman enjoying a dance? Before she could answer, the music ended and Wade stepped back, releasing her with a slight bow. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, something Willow wasn't sure how to address. The remainder of the evening was pleasant but tinged with an undercurrent of awareness. Willow danced with other men, Sheriff Davis, Tom Jennings, even old Clayton Morrison, but her attention kept returning to Wade, who was proving popular with the unmarried women of White Pine. When they finally departed for home, the night air was crisp with the promise of frost. They rode in companionable silence, Nathan and Sarah slightly ahead, Wade and Willow following. "Thank you for tonight," Wade said as they neared the ranch. "It's been a long time since I attended a proper dance." "It was nice," Willow admitted, "though I'd forgotten how much people gossip." Wade chuckled. "Mrs. Peterson asked me 3 times if we were courting, couldn't seem to understand our business arrangement. And what did you tell her? The truth. That we're partners in the Rockingham, nothing more." "And nothing less," Willow added, though part of her wondered if that was still entirely true. As fall gave way to winter, the Rockingham settled into a rhythm. The cattle were moved to sheltered pastures, hay was stored for the coldest days, and the buildings were reinforced against snow and wind. With 4 of them working together, the ranch was more productive than it had been since Michael Montgomery's death. Willow and Wade continued to share evening meals and planning sessions, but something had changed since the harvest dance. There was a carefulness in their interactions, a deliberate distance that hadn't been there before. Willow told herself it was for the best. Their partnership was too important to complicate with feelings that might not last. One December afternoon, as snow fell steadily outside, Willow sat at the kitchen table reviewing their accounts. The numbers were encouraging. The ranch was now operating at a small profit, and with the spring calves, they would be in even better shape. Wade entered, stomping snow from his boots. "Storm's picking up. Nathan and I got the last of the cattle moved to the south pasture where there's better shelter." "Good." Willow pushed the account book toward him. "Take a look at this. We're doing better than I expected." Wade removed his coat and sat beside her, studying the figures. "Not bad at all. If we can add another 20 head in the spring, we'll be on track to double the herd by next year." His shoulder brushed against hers as he leaned over the book, and Willow was acutely aware of his proximity. These moments of casual contact had become increasingly distracting. "I've been thinking," she said, moving slightly away, "about expanding our operation, not just cattle but perhaps horses as well. My father always said there was good money in breeding quality stock." "It's worth considering," Wade agreed, "though it would mean more work, possibly more hands." "We could start small. A few good mares, a stallion." Wade nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Let me think on it. I know a breeder in Kansas who might be willing to sell us some foundation stock." Their discussion was interrupted by Sarah, who burst into the kitchen, her face pale. "Nathan's been hurt. He was checking the fence line by the creek and his horse slipped on ice. Looks like his leg's broken." They rushed to help, finding Nathan grimacing in pain, his right leg bent at an unnatural angle. Between them, Wade and Willow managed to get him onto a makeshift stretcher and back to the house, where Sarah examined the injury. "It's broken all right," she confirmed. "We need to set it before the swelling gets worse." "I'll ride for the doctor," Wade said, already reaching for his coat. "In this storm," Willow shook her head, "it's too dangerous. The trail to town will be nearly impassable by now. We can't leave him like this." "My father taught me how to set a broken bone," Willow said with more confidence than she felt. "Sarah and I can manage if you'll help hold him still." Setting Nathan's leg was a grim task, but necessary. The big man bore it stoically, only a strangled groan escaping when the bone was manipulated back into place. Afterward, they splinted the leg with pieces of a wooden crate, and Sarah administered laudanum from the medicine cabinet to ease his pain. "He'll need to stay off it for at least 6 weeks," Sarah said once Nathan had fallen into an uneasy sleep. "Maybe longer." "We'll manage," Wade assured her. "You focus on taking care of him." With Nathan incapacitated, the workload increased significantly for Wade and Willow. The winter had turned harsh, with frequent storms and temperatures well below freezing. Each day was a struggle to ensure the cattle had access to food and unfrozen water. They worked from dawn until well after dark, often in conditions that made every task twice as difficult. Sarah helped where she could, but much of her time was devoted to caring for Nathan, whose recovery was slow but steady. One particularly bitter morning in January, Willow and Wade set out to check on a group of cattle that had been moved to a sheltered valley a mile from the ranch house. The snow was deep, and the wind cut through their heavy coats like a knife. "We should split up," Wade suggested as they reached the valley. "I'll check the north end, you take the south. We'll cover ground faster." Willow nodded, her face half hidden by a woolen scarf. "Meet back here in an hour." An hour. She headed south, counting cattle as she went. The herd seemed to be weathering the cold well, huddled together for warmth in the lee of a rocky outcropping. She was nearly finished with her count when she heard a distressed lowing nearby. Following the sound, she found a cow that had wandered away from the herd, now trapped in a snowdrift. As she approached, she saw why the animal had given birth prematurely, and her calf lay motionless in the snow. Willow dismounted, knowing she needed to get the cow back to the herd before she froze. The animal was weak from the birth and reluctant to leave her dead calf, but after some coaxing, Willow managed to get her moving. They had gone only a short distance when the wind suddenly intensified, bringing with it a wall of snow that reduced visibility to mere feet. A blizzard had descended without warning, transforming the familiar landscape into a disorienting white void. Willow knew the danger immediately. People had died in such storms, lost within yards of safety. She needed to find shelter and fast. Turning back toward where she thought the rocky outcropping might be, she led her horse and the weakened cow through deepening snow. Time seemed to stretch as she struggled forward, the cold seeping through her layers of clothing. Just when she feared she had become completely disoriented, her horse nickered, responding to another horse nearby. "Willow," Wade's voice cut through the howling wind. "Willow, where are you?" "Here," she called back, relief flooding through her. "Follow my voice." Moments later, Wade appeared through the curtain of snow, leading his own horse. "Thank God," he said, grabbing her arm. "We need shelter. There's a line shack about a quarter-mile east of here." Together, they fought their way through the storm, Wade leading, Willow following with her horse and the cow. The line shack, a small structure used by hands working the distant parts of the ranch, was barely visible until they were almost upon it. Inside, it was cold but blessedly free from the wind. Wade quickly started a fire in the small stove while Willow secured the animals in the attached lean-to. The cow had collapsed from exhaustion but was still breathing. "She calved," Willow explained as she joined Wade by the meager fire. "Lost the calf. I couldn't leave her to die." Wade nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. On a ranch, every animal mattered, especially breeding stock. "The storm came up fast," he said, removing his gloves to warm his hands. "Might be stuck here until it passes." Willow looked around the small cabin. It was sparsely furnished, a rough wooden table, 2 chairs, a narrow cot, and some basic supplies. "At least we have shelter and fire." As the day wore on, the blizzard showed no signs of abating. They took turns checking on the animals and feeding the fire, rationing the small supply of wood stored in the cabin. By nightfall, it was clear they would be spending the night. "You take the cot," Wade insisted. "I'll manage on the floor." Willow was too exhausted to argue. The day's exertions and the intense cold had drained her completely. She removed her outer layers but kept on her clothes as she lay down on the narrow cot. Wade spread his coat on the floor nearby, close to the stove, for warmth. Despite her fatigue, sleep eluded Willow. The howling of the wind, the occasional shifting of the animals in the lean-to, and the awareness of Wade's presence kept her awake. After an hour of restless turning, she sat up. "This is ridiculous," she said. "We're both freezing, and that floor can't be comfortable." "This cot is big enough for two if we're careful," Wade hesitated. "Willow, your reputation will hardly be damaged more than it already is by our partnership, and I'd rather risk gossip than have you freeze to death." She moved to make space. "Just stay on your side." Reluctantly, Wade joined her on the cot. They lay back to back, a careful few inches between them, but even that small distance seemed to vanish as their shared warmth began to ease the chill. "Thank you," Wade said quietly, "for finding me in the storm. I was worried when you didn't return to our meeting point. I should be thanking you. I was lost until I heard your voice." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the moaning of the wind. Despite the circumstances, Willow felt strangely at peace. "Do you ever regret it?" Wade asked after a while. "Our partnership," the question surprised her. "No, do you?" "Never." His voice was soft but certain. "These past months at the Rockingham have been the best of my life." Willow found herself turning to face his back, though in the darkness she could barely make out his shape. Even with all the work, the problems, even with those. He shifted slightly, and now they were face to face, inches apart. "Working beside you, building something together, it's what I've wanted for a long time. Not just a ranch, but a purpose, a home." The word home resonated deeply with Willow. The Rockingham had always been her home, but since her father's death it had often felt empty, a place of work and worry rather than comfort. Somehow Wade's presence had changed that. "I've been thinking," she said carefully, "about what you said that night at the harvest dance." "Which part?" "About us being more than business partners, about being a man and a woman." Even in the dim light, she could see Wade's expression grow serious. "I shouldn't have said that. We had an agreement. Maybe agreements can change." Willow's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "Maybe feelings change." Wade reached out slowly, his hand finding hers in the darkness. "Willow, I need to be clear. My feelings for you have grown far beyond our business arrangement, but I won't pressure you. If you want things to remain as they are." She silenced him with a touch to his lips. "I don't, not anymore." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question being asked and answered. The second was deeper, years of loneliness and longing poured into a single connection. When they finally pulled apart, Willow felt as though something fundamental had shifted within her, a wall she'd built around her heart beginning to crumble. "I've wanted to do that since the harvest dance," Wade confessed, his voice rough with emotion, "maybe even before." "Why didn't you?" "I gave my word business only, and I was afraid you'd think I had ulterior motives for the partnership." Willow smiled in the darkness. "I probably would have. I didn't trust easily then. And now I know you better." She moved closer, drawn to his warmth. "I've seen how you work, how you treat people, how you respect me as an equal." They talked through the night, sharing stories of their pasts, hopes for the future, the small confidences that build intimacy. When morning came, bringing with it clear skies and brilliant sunshine reflecting off the snow, they emerged from the lined shack different from when they'd entered, no longer just partners, but something more. The ride back to the ranch was challenging but beautiful, the world transformed into a glittering white landscape. They arrived to find Sarah frantic with worry, having spent a sleepless night imagining the worst. "We took shelter in the East Line shack," Willow explained, not meeting Sarah's knowing gaze. "The storm came up too quickly to make it back." "Thank heaven you're safe," Sarah said, ushering them inside where Nathan sat with his splinted leg propped on a chair. "I've kept coffee hot all night." As winter gradually released its grip on the land, Willow and Wade's relationship deepened. They were careful to maintain professionalism when working, but in the evenings, they allowed themselves to explore this new dimension between them. They shared meals, conversations, and increasingly, tender moments away from curious eyes. By March, Nathan was mobile again, though still favoring his healed leg. With his return to work, the burden on Wade and Willow eased, giving them more time to plan for the future of the Rocking M and their future together. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Wade took Willow's hand. "I've been thinking about our partnership agreement." "Oh." Willow felt a momentary flutter of anxiety. "Do you want to change the terms?" In a manner of speaking, Wade's expression was serious but warm. "I'd like to propose a more permanent arrangement, more permanent than our current agreement, much more permanent." He knelt before her, still holding her hand. "Willow Montgomery, I came here looking for a business partner and found the love of my life instead. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to Willow's eyes. Despite the growing closeness between them, she hadn't expected this, hadn't allowed herself to hope for it. "Wade, are you sure? Marriage is a bigger commitment than a business partnership." "I've never been more certain of anything." His gray eyes held her steadily. "I love you, Willow. I want to build the Rocking M with you, raise a family with you, grow old with you. What do you say?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." Their wedding in May was a simple affair, held on the ranch with the townsfolk of White Pine in attendance. Clara Jennings cried throughout the ceremony, later telling anyone who would listen that she'd known all along the partnership would end this way. Sheriff Davis offered a toast at the small reception. His weathered face creased in a rare smile. "To the only female rancher for 50 miles, and the cowboy smart enough to offer partnership before love. May your union be as successful as your ranch." As spring turned to summer, the Rocking M flourished under their combined care. The herd grew, the pastures thrived, and the house that had once felt so empty to Willow was now filled with love and plans for the future. On their first anniversary, Wade presented Willow with a gift papers transferring half ownership of the ranch land to his name. "I don't understand," she said, studying the documents. "You always insisted the land remain in my name." "That was when we were just business partners." Wade smiled, taking her hands in his. "Now we're husband and wife, equal partners in everything." Willow shook her head, pushing the papers back to him. "No, the Rocking M was my father's dream passed to me. Our children will inherit it someday, but it should stay in my name for now." Instead of being offended, Wade looked at her with pride. "That's my Willow." Always maintaining the upper hand. "Not the upper hand," she corrected, moving into his embrace. "Equal partners, remember, in business and in love." As the years passed, the Rocking M grew into one of the most respected cattle operations in Colorado. Wade and Willow Easton became known not just for their quality stock, but for their unique partnership, a marriage of equals in a time when such things were rare. They had 3 children, 2 sons, and a daughter, all raised with the same values that had brought their parents together. Hard work, mutual respect, and the understanding that love and partnership went hand in hand. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the work was done, Wade and Willow would often sit on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunset over the land they loved, hands intertwined, grateful for the storm that had brought them together and the love that had kept them that way.